So hello everyone, so in this episode we're going to be doing some painting with an airbrush. Last week we did some priming, so this week it's time to apply some paint. Okay, so I have our pieces that we did last week with the primer. We've got grey, black, white and gloss black, and then what I've done is I've selected some paint. Now I've selected this AK11866 light gold grey. It also has an FS number of 16440. Now this is a colour that I use a lot. This is a very popular US Navy aircraft colour. But the reason I've picked this one is because it's not airbrush ready. Don't be scared, it's not a problem. This one is another colour. This is a metallic colour. This is Steel by Vallejo acrylic metal colour, and this is airbrush ready. And I've picked these two. I do want to do a normal paint and I want to do a metallic, but I also want an airbrush ready and a not airbrush ready. So first thing I'm going to do is tell you why it's not airbrush ready or why it is airbrush ready. So give this a good shake, as we always do with all of our paints, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a drop to kitchen roll. And look, you see it's so thin and runny, and that's a really nice consistency for the airbrush. Now if I get my normal paint, give it a good shake like we always do. Actually that's quite good, because you can clearly now see the colour, and you can see the filler, whatever you want to call it, the carrier medium. So get a little bit of our light gold grey, and can you see how that's so much thicker? Now our airbrush has a very thin needle. In my case, I actually have what I regard as a big needle at 0.5 millimeters. 0.5 millimeters, half a millimeter. Now the pigment in that is going to get clogged. You see how thick it is? It's like pushing oil through a thin pipe compared to water. So the way we get round this is that we need to thin it down in the airbrush. Ever so simple to do, and one thing that you're going to hear a lot of is the word milk, semi-skimmed milk, and what people mean by that is that you want your airbrush to be, your paint to be thinned down to the consistency of milk. So I thin my paint extremely simply, and that is that I put in one drop. I'm actually using the wrong bottle here, because I don't normally use the big one. Now the reason I put a little bit of thinner in the bottom is if anything shoots down towards the needle, that's going to be the first thing that comes out. If I put paint in and that dribbles down, it could clog the nozzle right at the beginning, whereas if I put a little bit thinner in, it's gonna, the first thing that's going to shoot through is the water. So we then add our paint, and we put in enough paint that we think will do the job, and bearing in mind we're going to thin that down, so in most cases you're probably going to double, triple, sometimes even quadruple the amount in there. And then what you want is an old brush that you don't think much of anymore. I bought these cheap ones from Poundland. You get about 5 of them in a pack, and they're really good, and I like them because they got nylon bristles. Right, so pop in a little bit of thinner. Now what I do to get it started, I'll put my finger over the nozzle and I'll just pull back, see, because the air can't get through the end, it comes back up again, and it's a really good quick way of mixing that paint, and then give it a good mix. And then do you see how it's very difficult to explain, but do you see how that's sticking to the side? It's very, very runny, but it's sticking to the side. So I would consider that a little bit too thick. You want really, really nice thin layers. There we go. So we put a bit more in, give it a good mix, and look, see now it's pulling back down, just as though milk would. So what I'll then do is, you know, in a spare bit of the spray booth, I'll give a little bit of a spray. We'll see how that's coming out. For some reason that's not coming out at all, which is suggesting to me it's still too thick, or the airbrush is clogged. So now you can use water on a lot of paints. What you'll find is that some paints will thin well with water, some paints will not thin well with water. Right, okay. Houston, we have an issue. I think my airbrush is clogged. It's not a good start, is it? Guys, I'm going to have to clean that out. Be back in a sec. Okay, so hopefully that's my airbrush unclogged. So I've cleaned it all out and I've put new paint in there. Can you see that that's very, very runny? It is quite literally like having milk. Can you see how that's trying to pull down? It'll kind of stick to the sides, but if you give it a minute it will just pull itself down. And another way to test it is what I find with the AK Interactives, if you just pull back just a little bit, you're able to get a nice fine dusting there. If it starts to splutter, it's a bit thick. If it's spiders, it's way too thin. So how do we paint? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to paint half of each wing, and I'm going to give nice gentle layers. I'm going to say the other half for the metallics, and like I say, just give a little test. If you look there, you'll see that it's just very, very gentle. In fact, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pop a glove on, and now obviously each colour varies. You've got some colours such as reds, they're going to be a lot more visible. A lot of the weaker colours you're going to need more layers. But another little test, look, just a little gentle. Can you see how I'm just painting the back of my glove very, very gently? And then if I pull right back, that might be a little bit thick. That's just starting to splutter. So we'll put a little bit more thinner in. And this is how you turn a not airbrush ready paint into airbrush ready. So there we go. Right, so just as before, what's really important is that we're going to keep our airbrush flat. So we're looking for, it's very hard to see because it's grey. In fact, it's impossible. So there we've got a nice round. If we come in at an angle, remember, we get this spider webbing. Can you see that? So it's important to keep our airbrush level. So we're going to come across in nice even strokes, and we're going to just build that paint up gently. Once we're happy with the first layer, and we're not looking to do this in one layer. Once that's dried off, we can come in with another layer. Quite similar to the priming, in that we're just dusting at first. Once we've got a few layers on, you know, we can go a little bit thicker. But what's most important, see, there's a couple of bits of shine there, so I don't want to be applying the second layer yet. Once that's dried off, use the airbrush to dry if you want. Now we can come in with our second layer, and once we've got a nice, that's a bit too much there, just back that off a bit, do a bit more drying. If we think we've gone way too much, We can always start on the other piece, if we have another piece, that is. And we're just going to put some nice, gentle, it's about not being impatient. So you'll see there it's quite hard to see on the grey, because grey on grey is a little bit difficult to spot. It will certainly make an impact on the black. I'm just going to build those layers up. Now the advantage with an airbrush ready paint is that you may be able to cover this in less coats, and that's okay if you need to do more. You may not want to do it in less coats, you might want to build that coat up gently. So, and the thinner the paint, the more coats we're going to need to get good coverage. Okay, so I'm just going to give that a bit of a stir. Just not happy with the paint. There we go. There we go. So it's always typical that when I'm showing on camera what I'm doing, it's going to start to go wrong. So this colour is, it's a grey, but it's a nice warm grey. So what you'll notice on this one is you've got these nice orange, warm tones, and then as you build the paint up, it will go more grey. I find on a white, it kind of looks like it's not even the colour it's meant to be. I think I'm having airbrush issues here. I'm just going to thin it down slightly. Right, so yeah, I've got a lot of splatter, and I think it's more to do with the airbrush than anything else. I'll keep going because it's still going to demonstrate okay. So the most important thing is that we get smooth layers. What we don't want to be doing is, see how I've painted my hand there, we need to keep away from doing this, and we certainly need to keep away from doing that. So we don't want to be going full blast on the airbrush, because you see that that's just made a mess. Even if you do keep it absolutely level but you go full blast, can you just see the mess I've made there? Because we put so much paint on, and with the airflow it's pushing it all away, so that's just a mess. So bear with me a sec, I just need to clean the glove off a bit now. So go back to the painting, we keep the layers nice and thin, nice and steady, and we'll just keep building that up until we're happy with the result. I'm getting quite happy with that now. Maybe another layer. And this one's building up nicely too. This is coming out as a nice solid grey. We could do a little bit more focus on any areas that we may have missed. Because if you continuously miss one area, then we're going to get a colour variation. Just do a bit of focus on there. So there we go, over time. And it's always just paint, air, paint, air. Now, I'm going to backtrack because there's one thing, vital thing that I forgot to tell you. If you were to go straight in, you're going to get kind of it's a little bit like spray painting. When I'm painting this, I'm not actually starting there and finishing there. What I'm doing is I'm starting round about there. The air comes on, the paint comes on, and then we continue going through, and then we release the paint round about there. So it's air, paint, release, stop. So we don't start in the middle, we always, the paint comes on, and when we want to stop the paint, we always make sure the airbrush has made a pass. So, and it's if you watch my finger, I'm always, you'll see me doing this. It's the backwards and forwards and the up and down. Quite often what I do is I might keep the air on constantly, but it's the paint that's, so if you watch my finger, it's very hard to do when you're trying to explain it. When you actually do it, you just do it. And there we go. I'm just keeping those passes steady. You can see from the lines that I've made how it's gone. You see that I've gone all the way to the end there, and I've started back here. And you can see from the spray booth the amount of overspray I've got. So there we go. If I show you on this one, so the paint trail starts about there, finishes there, and the result on the wing, as you can see the white line, it goes all the way to the end of the line. So I think this is just about ready for the last pass, and that's some nice solid coats. What I should have done as well is shown you maybe white on black. There is a big argument, a big debate in the scale model world. You cannot paint white over black, and it is extremely hard to do. Do you know, every time I put this down, I'm not quite happy with it. I believe you can paint white. It is difficult to do. So, right, so what I want to do now, this is a slight optical illusion because of the primer, but we now have the same colour applied, and it's quite hard to see on camera. What we've ended up with is, although we've got one big solid patch of grey, and I say I'm sorry, it is difficult to see, but we actually have 4 different colours. So this is quite a slightly brighter grey because it's over the top of white primer, and this is a lot darker because it's over black. Now the more coats that we apply, the less effect that primer is going to have, but it's there, and as I say, it's quite hard to see. I think that's quite obvious. So the trouble is, it's a slight optical illusion because you can see the primer. Therefore your eyes go, well, that's meant to be darker, and yeah, there. But if I kind of hide this, I can see the difference. So yeah, so colour primer choice is quite important. Right, so I'm going to come back to the metallic later. Excuse me, because that's going to save me a colour change. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to do these two where we want to do we've got the pre-shading and we've got the black basing. Now when we are using the black to do the panel lines, I like to just thin my paint a little bit more, not a ton more, just a little bit. The negative on this is that it's going to take more coats to cover, but the plus being, wait, that wasn't good, was it? Don't know if you saw that. I think I've got total blockage. So yeah, the negative is that it's going to take a lot more coats to get sufficient coverage, but the plus is that we're able to just build that colour up. We want to creep up on the correct colour rather than just go bang and there it is. So what we're going to do is we're going to paint this in exactly the same way as we did before, but with you because we've got thinner paints. So there's our first layer. And you can see it's hardly made any difference. All it's done is just lightened the black a little bit. So we're going to come in with a second coat. And the only trouble I find with this paint, it's going to darken when it dries. So what happens is that you come in and you think, oh, that's nice, that's just about there. And then it dries off and it darkens and you're like, man, it's nowhere near there now. So we come in with a third coat. Okay. And then we just keep adding coats, very, very thin. You can see it's starting to blend now. Okay, now we're starting to get that randomness is just starting to show. So I might perhaps consider just hitting the bits that are a little bit odd and then come in with another layer. Okay. And we're almost there now. So now we want to start focusing just a little bit more. So I'm not happy with that splodge there. I must have just hit a little bit too much on the airbrush. So I might just start hitting that bit. There's a bit up here I'm not 100% happy with. You know, I don't want to make it look like someone's gone a bit mad on the airbrush. And we're just starting to think about where we're aiming. And we're just going to give that and there you see I am almost there now, and we're starting to get that sun bleach. So where the black is, yeah, it's gone in a little bit too dark, and where the white is, it's a little bit, but now it's just bringing those two together. So we've got a slight random. Remember that the way that the sun and external factors affects things, there is no textbook on how to do it. It's quite random. There we go. Now, if I know that I'm going to be doing oils on the top to do weathering, I might stop there, because although it's not 100% perfect, it can be corrected later. But if this is you're planning on finishing, you know, no external additional weathering, then you might want to just take that a little bit further. And there we go. That is almost perfect. Okay. Now what I would consider doing now, and I'm not going to because I want to do this side, but I might now just pop a little drop, tiny bit of drop of white in there, and then just maybe think about hitting those middle panels. So just draw them in fairly randomly. Yeah, just to emphasize those panel lines even further, just take it further away from the colour of the panel line, and I've just gone in too much there. And just where you've got distinct lines, just maybe just try to join those up. And I'm going very, very little trigger on the colour. Now the difficulty here is that I've just told you earlier on when you're coming in with your passes, you want to start your colour there and finish after. Because I'm starting in the middle, I'm having to begin my colour already over the model. So what I'm doing is I'm making sure the air comes out, and I'm just bringing that colour in gently, and then once I can then I'm using very, very little colour. For that's the basics of black basing, and then the panel lining is pretty much the same, to be honest with you. So a nice gentle first layer. Okay. See, that's starting to become a little bit more blended. So don't worry if you've missed any colour change, because on this side I'm not touching that, so I want to do it before and after. So you can see that those panel lines are starting to blend in a little bit, and hopefully, without having to show you, you can start to see how, if I didn't use black and white, maybe if I used a dark grey and a light grey to do the panel lining, you'll see how, because the two extremes are quite closer to each other to begin with, the effect is going to be much more mild and not so stark. Some people would argue that using black is not a good choice because it's too much, and obviously it's all down to personal taste. So that's almost there. So you see you've got your panel lining, and then you might want to perhaps just start to hit the middle of the panel, avoiding the panel lines. So that, guys, is how I would paint any colour, whether it be grey, white, black, red. The principle is all the same. So this is straight painting, and then you could go in afterwards with your panel lining. This is straight painting, and this is more black basing and panel lines, and you can still go in with your panel lining as well and your weathering, but I personally like this because it's given us that random worn effect. So that's what it started off like, and that's after, and this is straight. Tell me what you guys think. Do you like this nice clean effect, or do you like the panel lining, or do you like the black basing? So right, guys, so I'm going to take a little bit of a cut, and then what we're going to do is we're going to do some metallic, and then that should finish the video off. Okay, so I've given my airbrush a nice clean, and it's all ready to receive the next paint, and this time we're going to use metallics. Now, the actual process of using metallic isn't any different from using a paint. You're still going to need to thin it, get it to the right consistency, but what I'm going to focus on here is the fact that this is an airbrush colour. As you use more paints, it's you'll get to know some paints you need to thin more than others, some you don't need to thin at all. Generally, airbrush ready means you can just pop it straight in the airbrush and just go for it. So all the time that I took thinning the paint, with this particular one you don't need to. Now, do not confuse the words don't need to thin with cannot thin. You can still thin these if you want, and I've been known to do that, but on the whole, all you need to do is just pour some straight in and you see it's almost like water. And when you spray this, no thinning at all, beautiful, nice flow there. You know, I couldn't do a better job myself of thinning that. So the hardest job is knowing how much to put in. It's just one of those things that if you don't put enough in, you're going to be topping it up, and if you put too much in, you're going to be wasting all at the end. Right, so exactly the same principle as before. We're going to be spraying in, we're going to be coming across, and we're going to be starting our paint round about there and finishing just after. Nice thin coats, and we're just going to come across, and we're not expecting it. You get a really good layer from this because of the type of paint that it is, but we're not expecting to complete this in one coat. And there we go, that's one layer, and it's not an especially great layer, because once that's dry we'll put a second layer on, and now we're going to start to get a better result. There you go, second layer going on, and now I'm just look at the position of my finger. I'm just drying it. There's the position for paint. There's air. I'm using the airbrush to dry the paint, and then I can come in with a third layer if I feel I need it. And I'm trying not to go up to the grey. I just want to keep that that primer. I need to remember which one is which. So yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the gloss and that's the grey. No, that's the gloss. Right. So just give this probably a fourth layer just to catch any little bits I've missed. Because I'm on camera, I'm kind of putting slightly less paint on than I normally would to avoid any nasty surprises. Right, so there we go. There's a nice solid coat. Look at that. Isn't that a beautiful colour? It's almost got that rainbow effect that you get with metallics. So let's pop some on the white and the gloss, and I'm going to come across this line. I'm going to take advantage of that angle. So first layer's going on quite nice. You know, it's not a superb layer, it's just an initial layer. And then we can come in with our second layer. Okay. Third layer if we feel it needs it. And I'll just give that a little bit of a tidy up. Beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. And there's our steel. So let's do a comparison there. So I don't think the difference on the matte primer is making a lot of difference, but I do think there's a slight difference down here. Just seems a little bit shimmery, a little bit more of a shine to it. But that's you see how much easier it was. Hopefully we're all happy with this, and I'm gonna put some over here. I'm gonna do these, and then we'll see what the difference is. And this is almost a one coat coverage, and that's because of the paint, not because of the fact that it's metallic. Really good pigmentation on this. Okay. So there's roughly one coat, it's pretty much covered, and that's because of how good the paint is, not because metallics will cover up all of your work. Oops, a little bit heavy there. Right, so I said before I started this, do not confuse with airbrush. Don't need to thin. Don't confuse that with cannot thin. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thin this 50-50. So it's going to become much thinner. And we're going to do this other side of the tail. And there we see, look, the coverage isn't as great, but it's certainly working fine. So you may find that this is economical if you thin it down. You might want to use it straight from the pot. So I found that I was putting 3 layers onto this straight from the pot. If I thinned it 50-50, I might get 5 layers, which is the equivalent of 2.5. So I've saved myself a little bit of paint in that instance. I might even get this done in 4. Okay. Right, so let's have a little comparison between the thinned metallic, and I don't think you can really tell much difference, can you? I think this one was I think this was the thinned one, and this was straight from the pot. So you don't, you can still thin, but obviously, as you saw, the job was made a lot easier because I've saved all that time with the thinning. So, as I always say, if there's any questions, by all means ask away. I personally, with areas such as this, I would definitely airbrush, and that's because of the smooth finish that you can achieve. I wouldn't have confidence in my brushing ability to get a nice smooth finish. You can see that the layers are so thin that it's not obscured any detail, none whatsoever. There's 2 or 3 layers of primer on there, and there's probably about 5 or 6 coats of paint there, and about 3 there. So this particular spot here, there's about 8 layers of paint, and look at that nice sharp crisp, that nice crisp sharp detail. And then if I was to get my panel liner out, I'm going to do this very quickly, guys, because this isn't a lesson about panel lining, and I will cover panel lining one day, but I'm just about to do this, if I can find a brush, purely to show you how good that panel line is. The fact that it's not, why have I got the grey one out? I want the black one. Sorry guys. So yeah, like I say, this isn't a lesson about panel lining. This is just there's 8 layers of paint. And you can see from there, no loss of detail. None whatsoever. There's a tiny panel line there. Yeah. So none of your detail's been lost, and you can see that from the panel lining. I know it's terrible panel lining, it hasn't been cleaned up, but well, like I say, this isn't a lesson on panel lining. You can see how much detail you've preserved by keeping your paint layers thin. Okay, I'll do some here. Look at that, beautiful. Yeah, really thick. These thin lines there. Can you see? Really sharp, nice lines. And that's what you're trying to achieve, and that's part of the reason why you'll use an airbrush. If you were to put 8 layers of paint on with a brush, especially if you're using enamel paint, I really don't think you'd have any detail left anywhere. Right, so there is my quick lesson or my quick showing you how to airbrush paint. You see I've got a bit of paint left over, so that's going to need a good clean up, which is coincidental because the next video is going to be all about cleaning your airbrush. It's going to be showing you what I call a battle clean and then a full clean. The reason I call it a battle clean is because I made a comparison when I was a cadet and we were given rifles to play with. We were obviously shown how to clean them, and we were shown the difference between doing a field clean and a full strip. And it just, when I do my airbrush, it reminds me of that. You have cleaning ready to do another brush, another coat of paint, and then you have the full clean. So guys, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope I've covered any questions you may have. I hope that this has given you the confidence to have a go with an airbrush. You know, if you're looking at these results, you know, are you thinking, actually I want those results, I might consider getting an airbrush just to get those results. And once you've started using an airbrush, perhaps start looking at this panel lining and black basing. I really like the results. You know, once you've tried it out a few times, it's something that I find I can't stop doing now. So there's this has all been black based. This is another model that I've nearly finished. So this has all been black based, and the panel lines, and then a little bit of extra white added to the grey to just lighten the bigger panels up. Maybe I could have gone down along the top and gone a little bit lighter, because things like this bit here will probably catch the sun more, and then the outside of the wings. Remember that when the sun comes in at this angle, this bit there isn't going to get hit so much, and likewise when the sun comes at this angle, it'll leave that. But these outer edges of the wings, they're always going to get hit. So, you know, maybe perhaps, but actually there I've got completely different colour on the end of the wing, which is actually very good. I didn't do that on purpose, but it just shows, just gives a little bit of interest. So let me change to my front camera. So guys, as I said, I hope you've enjoyed the video. I hope it's given you a little bit of a perhaps confidence to just have a little go at the airbrush. Just move that up, don't need that up and down anymore. So yes guys, so I will catch you in the next video when we're going to do that most boring job. We're going to be doing some cleaning. Take care guys.